Darius checked the numbers for the third time, not because he doubted them, but because he wanted to feel the electric thrill of reality sink in. At 36 years old, drawing a modest salary of $58,000 a year to ensure every spare dollar was reinvested, he had finally done it. The screen of his beat-up $450 Dell laptop glowed in the dim light of his Northside detail bay. Gross revenue for Jack's Precision Detailing LLC, his baby, had just crossed the $100,000 mark for the year. $100,000 earned from the sweat of his brow, the ache in his back, and the relentless, obsessive care he poured into every vehicle that rolled through his doors. He had started this with a used 2012 Ford Transit van he'd bought for $11,000 cash and a dream. Today, he had a fleet of 3 vans, 2 full-time employees, and a reputation for being the best in Jacksonville. A wide, genuine smile spread across his face, the kind he hadn't let himself feel in months. He had to tell Tasha. He imagined the look on her face, the way her eyes would light up. She was always talking about stability, about building something real, about escaping the life they'd both grown up with. This was it. This was the proof. This number wasn't just money, it was security. It was a future. It was the physical manifestation of thousands of hours spent scrubbing, polishing, and perfecting. He grabbed his keys, the metal cool against his calloused palm, and shut down the shop an hour early. He wanted to surprise her. He pictured picking up a bottle of that sparkling wine she liked, the one that cost an absurd $75 a bottle, and a bouquet of lilies from the florist on San Jose Boulevard. He'd walk into their sleek, modern riverfront condo, the one with the $2,800 a month rent she'd insisted on, and he'd hold up the printout. We did it. The drive from the industrial grit of Northside to the polished glass towers of San Marco was a journey between 2 worlds. His world was one of concrete floors, the smell of carnauba wax, and the honest fatigue of a day's labor. Her world was floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the St. Johns River, minimalist furniture that cost more than his first van, and the quiet, sterile hum of central air. He'd always felt like a visitor there, his work boots a scuff mark on her pristine aesthetic. But today he felt different. Today, he felt like he had finally earned his place in that high-rise, that his sweat had paid for the view. He parked his personal car, a reliable 2012 Toyota Camry, with 187,000 miles on the odometer, in the reserved spot next to her gleaming white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car she'd leased 3 months ago for networking purposes. He had no idea how wrong he was. He was walking into the end of his world, holding a piece of paper that he thought was a trophy, but was about to become a weapon. Their life together had become a performance of domestic normalcy, and Darius, he now realized, had been the only one who didn't have the script. Mornings were a carefully choreographed routine. At 5:30 a.m., his $30 digital alarm clock would beep, and he'd slide out of their king-sized bed, careful not to wake Tasha, who slept soundly in her $300 silk pajamas. He'd pull on his work clothes, a simple pair of $45 Dickies, and a polo shirt embroidered with the Jack's Precision logo, a logo he'd designed himself on a free website. Downstairs in their gourmet kitchen with its $4,000 stainless steel refrigerator, he would make coffee and pack his own lunch, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat and an apple. He'd also pack a lunch for their 6-year-old daughter, Maya. Her lunchbox was a bright pink unicorn-themed box that cost $15 at Target. He'd cut the crusts off her sandwich just the way she liked and add a bag of goldfish crackers and a juice box. Tasha would usually drift into the kitchen around 7:30 a.m., just as he was about to leave. She'd be wrapped in a plush white robe, a $150 piece from a boutique she loved, her phone already in hand. "Morning, babe," she'd murmur, her eyes scanning emails. "Don't forget Maya has ballet at 4. You have to be back to pick her up." It was never a question. It was a directive. He'd nod, kiss Maya's forehead as she sat at the polished quartz island eating a bowl of cereal, and head out. His work was dirty, physical, and exhausting, but the thought of his daughter's bright smile kept him going. The contrast in their expenditures was a quiet, constant hum beneath the surface of their marriage. He wore an $89 Timex watch. She wore a $3,500 Cartier watch, a gift to herself for landing a new consulting client. He bought his work boots at Walmart for $60. She had a collection of designer shoes, each pair costing upwards of $700, arranged in color-coded rows in her custom walk-in closet. When the dishwasher broke, he spent 4 hours on a Saturday watching YouTube videos and fixed the $25 pump himself. When her laptop slowed down, she insisted on a new $2,800 MacBook Pro, claiming her old one was unprofessional. He tried to bring up their spending once, gently. It was after he saw a credit card statement with a $2,400 charge for a Burberry dress. They were sitting on their $5,000 leather sofa, the city lights twinkling through the massive windows. "Tasha," he began, his voice soft, "this is a lot. We need to be saving. The business is growing, but it's not invincible." She didn't even look up from her iPad. "Darius, you don't understand. This is an investment. I have to look a certain way for these networking events. It's about perception. You handle the vans, I'll handle the brand." He'd let it drop. He trusted her. He believed she was building something on her end, something that complemented his hard work. He thought they were a team, each contributing in their own way. He saw her expensive clothes and lunches at fancy restaurants not as extravagances, but as the cost of doing business in her world, a world he didn't fully understand but supported completely. He remembered the day they'd signed the lease on the San Marco condo. He had been hesitant. The North Side apartment they'd lived in was half the price, and it was home. But Tasha had been insistent. "This is about aspiration, Darius," she'd said, sweeping her hand towards the panoramic view. "This is the life we deserve. Maya deserves to see this, to know this is possible." He looked at his daughter, her small face pressed against the glass, and he'd caved. He signed the lease, the $5,600 for the first month's rent and security deposit making his stomach clench. He'd just have to work harder, take on more clients, spend more weekends detailing yachts in Ponte Vedra to make it work. For his family, he would do anything. He just didn't realize his family was a facade, and he was the only one paying for the set. The outrage didn't accumulate all at once. It was a slow poison, administered in small daily doses he'd failed to recognize. The signs were all there, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to a truth he wasn't ready to see. It started with language. She stopped saying "we" when talking about the business. It became "my project," or "the venture I'm advising on." When her friends would ask what Darius did, she'd offer a vague, dismissive answer. "Oh, Darius, he handles the operations side," she'd say with a wave of her hand, as if he were a hired manager, and not the man who had built the entire enterprise from nothing. Then came her sister, Vanessa. Vanessa was Tasha's echo, but louder and sharper. She'd come over for brunch dressed in an $800 dress and look around the condo with an air of proprietary pride. One Sunday, Darius came home early, covered in grime after an emergency cleanup job on a client's RV. Vanessa was there, sipping mimosas with Tasha on the balcony. As he walked in, Vanessa looked him up and down, her nose wrinkling in distaste. "Tasha, really," she said, loud enough for him to hear. "You can't have the help just walking through the main living area like that. It's unseemly." Darius froze, his hand on the door. Tasha just laughed, a light tinkling sound that did nothing to soften the blow. "Oh, stop it, V. That's just Darius. He gets a little dirty." She didn't defend him. She didn't correct her sister. She just accepted the insult. confirming his status as something less than, something separate from the pristine life she was building. He walked away, the shame burning hot in his chest. He spent an extra 30 minutes in the shower, scrubbing his skin raw, as if he could wash away the humiliation. The phone calls became more frequent and more secretive. She'd be laughing and talking on the phone in the living room, but the moment he walked in, her voice would drop to a whisper, and she'd quickly walk into their bedroom, closing the door behind her. He once heard her say, "No, the branding was all me. The initial capital strategy, the growth plan, that was my vision from day one." He assumed she was talking about one of her consulting projects. It never occurred to him she could be talking about his business, the one he bled for every single day. The financial separation was another red flag he'd ignored. A year ago, she insisted they get separate bank accounts. "It's for my independence," she'd explained. "I need to feel like I have my own money, my own power. It's a feminist thing. You wouldn't understand?" He'd agreed, wanting to be a supportive, modern husband. He continued to deposit his earnings into their joint account to pay for the rent, the car lease, the groceries, Maya's school, all their shared expenses. She opened a private account, and her consulting fees, she claimed, went in there. He never asked to see the statements. He trusted her. That trust was his greatest mistake. The final piece of the escalating betrayal was a dinner party they attended at the home of one of Tasha's new friends in a sprawling mansion in Queens Harbor. It was a world of old money and new tech, and Darius felt deeply out of place in his best $300 suit. Throughout the night, he watched Tasha move through the crowd, charming and confident. He overheard a man with a heavy gold watch ask her what she did. Darius leaned closer, expecting to hear about her consulting work. "I'm a founder," Tasha said, her voice smooth as silk. "I built a high-end service-based company from the ground up. We've cornered the luxury market in Jacksonville. It's all about identifying a need and executing a flawless brand strategy." Darius felt a prickle of confusion. Was she talking about his business? She had helped him pick out the logo colors, sure, and offered opinions on the website layout, but founder? Built it from the ground up? That was his story. Those were his sleepless nights, his gambles, his work. Later that night, as they drove home over the Intracoastal Waterway, he tried to ask her about it. "What you said tonight, about being a founder. What company were you talking about?" She shot him a sharp, irritated look. "I was networking, Darius. You have to speak their language. It's just branding. Don't be so literal." She turned up the volume on the car's stereo, a clear signal that the conversation was over. He let it go. He told himself he was being sensitive, that he didn't understand her world. He drove the rest of the way home in silence, a cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He was a frog in a pot of slowly boiling water, and the temperature had just been turned all the way up. What she didn't know was that he was about to get all the proof he needed. The day it all shattered was a Tuesday, October 17th. He arrived home at 6:47 p.m., the printout of the year-to-date revenue tucked into a manila folder, the $75 bottle of Prosecco sweating in a paper bag in his hand. He felt a boyish excitement, a lightness in his step. The evening was warm, and the air on the river was thick with the scent of salt and blooming jasmine from the manicured gardens below their condo. He took the elevator up to the 14th floor, his heart thumping a little faster with anticipation. As he approached their front door, number 14B, he noticed it was slightly ajar. Odd. Tasha was meticulous about security. He pushed it open and stepped into the cool, silent foyer. "Tasha? Maya?" he called out. No answer. He figured Maya was in her room playing, and Tasha was perhaps on the balcony. He walked through the living room, placing the bottle on the kitchen counter. That's when he heard voices drifting in from the back of the condo. The sliding glass door to their expansive balcony was open. He moved quietly, not wanting to interrupt if she was on an important call. He stopped in the shadows of the hallway just out of sight. Tasha was on the balcony, pacing back and forth, her phone on the small glass table, on speaker. Her sister Vanessa's voice was tinny but clear. Darius stood frozen, listening. "Okay, let's run through it one more time," Vanessa said. "The investors will be there. Mark's parents are the real target. You have to be perfect." I know, Tasha said, her voice tight with a mixture of nerves and arrogance. "Just prompt me." "Fine," Vanessa said. So, Mrs. Covington asks, "Tasha, it's so impressive what you've built. What was the initial inspiration?" "What do you say?" Darius's blood ran cold. He leaned against the wall, the plaster cool against his back. Tasha took a deep breath, and her voice shifted, becoming smooth, practiced, and performative. "Well, Eleanor," she began, using the name of her boyfriend's mother, "I've always had an eye for untapped luxury markets. I saw all these successful men and women in Jacksonville, doctors, lawyers, executives, driving these incredible cars, these $150,000 Porsches and Teslas. But they were taking them to the same $5 car washes as everyone else. There was a clear disconnect. They valued their time and their assets, but the market wasn't serving them with a premium, concierge-level experience. The vision for Jack's Precision Detailing was born from that simple observation: to bring white glove service to the automotive space. Darius felt the air leave his lungs. Those were his words, almost verbatim. He had said that to her 100 times over late-night dinners when he was sketching out his business plan on napkins. That was his vision. Vanessa's voice crackled through the speaker. "Good, that's good. Now, Mark's dad is a numbers guy. He'll ask about the business model and scaling." Tasha didn't hesitate. "The model is subscription-based for our core clientele, which creates predictable recurring revenue. We scaled by focusing on strategic partnerships with luxury dealerships and corporate fleet accounts. I personally negotiated the initial contracts with the yacht clubs in Ponte Vedra and St. Augustine. We were profitable within the first 6 months, which is almost unheard of." A wave of nausea washed over Darius. He had negotiated those contracts. He had spent weeks cold calling, offering free demonstrations, proving his worth. He was the one who had worked 80-hour weeks to make the business profitable. "Perfect," Vanessa said. "Now the tricky part. They know you're married. They're going to ask about your husband. What does he do? How does he fit in?" Darius held his breath. This was it. The moment of truth. Tasha let out a small, condescending laugh. "Oh, Darius," she said, her voice dripping with a mix of pity and dismissal. "He's wonderful, really. He's a hard worker. I needed someone I could trust to manage the day-to-day, the actual labor. He's fantastic with the clients, and he drives the primary van. It was the perfect arrangement. I handle the vision, the brand, the strategy, the important stuff. He just drives the van I built." He just drives the van I built. The words hit him like a physical blow. The manila folder slipped from his numb fingers, landing on the hardwood floor with a soft thud. The world tilted on its axis. Every shared memory, every sacrifice he'd made, every moment of trust he'd offered her was a lie. He wasn't her partner, he was her prop. He wasn't the builder, he was the help. His entire life, the foundation upon which he had built his family and his future, was a carefully constructed fiction, and she was the author. He backed away slowly, silently, his heart a block of ice in his chest. He turned and walked out of the condo, closing the door so gently it didn't even click. He left the $75 bottle of Prosecco sitting on the counter, a monument to a celebration that would never happen. The time on his $89 Timex read 6:54 p.m. In the span of 6 minutes, his marriage had ended. He just didn't know it yet. The drive back to the shop was a blur. He didn't remember the traffic on the Acosta Bridge or the familiar turns through the north side streets. When he arrived, the metal roll-up door was cool and solid beneath his trembling hands. Inside, the familiar smell of leather conditioner and citrus-based cleaner did nothing to soothe him. He sat down on an overturned 5-gallon bucket, the same kind he used for washing cars, and stared at the centerpiece of his business, the fully equipped 2018 Ford Transit van, a $48,000 investment that represented his life savings. On the side, in clean, professional lettering, was the logo he'd designed, Jack's Precision Detailing. His name wasn't on it. A critical mistake, he now realized. He knew he couldn't go back to the condo that night. He couldn't face her. He couldn't look into her eyes and pretend he hadn't heard. The thought of sleeping in the same bed, of breathing the same air, was suffocating. He sent her a text, his thumbs moving stiffly. "Hey, emergency job just came in. A client spilled paint in a classic car. Going to be an all-nighter. Don't wait up, love you." The "love you" felt like acid on his tongue. Her reply came back instantly. "Oh no, poor you, work hard. Big night for me tomorrow. Need my beauty sleep anyway. XOXO. No concern, no questions, just relief that he would be out of her way. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. Darius entered a state of cold, surgical calm. The searing pain in his chest was packed away, compartmentalized. He was now on a mission, gathering evidence, playing the part of the devoted, oblivious husband. He'd come home late and leave early, using the business as an excuse. In the brief moments they were together, he was a ghost of his former self, but a convincing one. On Wednesday morning, the day of her big founder's dinner, he watched her get ready. She laid out the $2,400 Burberry dress on their bed. "What do you think?" she asked, holding it up against herself. "Is it visionary founder enough?" He felt a bitter laugh rise in his throat, but he choked it down. "You look beautiful, Tasha," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of sincerity. "You look like you could run the world." She beamed at him, a dazzling, false smile. "That's the idea," she said, turning back to the mirror. While she was in the shower, he did something he had never done before. He went to her laptop, the sleek $2,800 MacBook Pro he'd paid for. It was open. He knew her password. It was Maya's birthday. His hands shook as he opened her email. He searched for Jack's Precision. Dozens of emails came up. Emails to her new boyfriend, Mark. Emails to Mark's parents. Emails to a graphic designer commissioning a new version of his logo with her name listed as founder and CEO. He found the presentation she was planning to give that night. It was a 20-page deck, full of charts and projections he had created, but with her headshot on the first slide. It detailed a 5-year growth plan, including franchising opportunities, a plan he had shared with her in confidence just a month before. She had stolen his entire future. He took out his phone and photographed every single screen, the emails, the presentation, the mock-ups of business cards that read Tasha Williams, founder. Each photo was another nail in her coffin. He felt no anger, no rage, just a profound, chilling emptiness. He was an archaeologist uncovering the ruins of his own life. That evening, as she prepared to leave for the dinner, she was glowing with excitement. She kissed Maya goodnight, her expensive perfume, a $350 bottle of Chanel No. 5, hanging in the air. "Wish me luck, my little love," she cooed. Then she turned to Darius. "Don't work too late tonight, okay?" she said, adjusting the collar of his shirt. It was a gesture of feigned intimacy that made his skin crawl. "I'll be home late, probably celebrating." "I'm sure you will be," he said, his voice flat. "Knock 'em dead." He watched her walk out the door, a vision of confident, stolen success. He waited until he heard the elevator doors ding shut. Then he went to Maya's room. She was sitting on her bed, coloring in a book. He sat down next to her. "Hey, sweet pea, can you draw Daddy a picture?" She nodded eagerly. "What should I draw?" she asked. "Draw our family," he said softly. "Draw us." As he watched her pick up a brown crayon, he knew what he had to do. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Thursday, at 9:15 a.m., Darius walked into the offices of Adebayo and Associates, a law firm located in a modest but respectable building on Bay Street. He had found Ms. Adebayo online, her profile emphasizing intellectual property and small business law. Her face in the photo was sharp, intelligent, and no nonsense. He wore his cleanest work polo and a pair of jeans, feeling out of place in the quiet, carpeted hallway. He was shown into a conference room with a view of the Main Street Bridge. A few minutes later, a woman with luminous, deep brown skin and elegant salt and pepper locks swept into the room. This was Bola Adebayo. She carried a single yellow legal pad and a pen. Her suit was a perfectly tailored navy blue that probably cost $1,500. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice calm and measured, "thank you for coming in." "My paralegal said it was an urgent business matter." Darius nodded, his throat dry. He opened the manila folder he'd brought and began to lay out the documents on the polished mahogany table. First, the LLC formation papers for Jack's Precision Detailing LLC, filed 3 years ago. It listed one member and one manager, Darius Williams. "Sole proprietorship," he said, his voice hoarse. Next, he laid out the certificate from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for the name Jack's Precision Detailing and its accompanying logo. The owner was listed as Darius Williams. Then came the bank statements showing 3 years of revenue, every single client check, every credit card payment, deposited into an account solely in his name. Finally, he pulled out his phone and showed her the pictures he had taken from Tasha's laptop. Ms. Adebayo listened without interruption for 20 minutes. She examined each document, her eyes sharp and focused. She scrolled through the photos on his phone, her expression unreadable. When he finished speaking, the story of the overheard phone call and the stolen presentation hanging in the air between them, she was silent for a full minute. She clicked her pen once. "Mr. Williams?" she said finally, her voice devoid of pity, but full of professional gravity. "What she is doing is not just morally reprehensible, it is illegal. This is clear-cut trademark infringement, fraud, and misrepresentation. She has no legal claim to your business, none." A wave of relief, so profound it almost made him dizzy, washed over Darius. "So what can I do?" "That depends," Ms. Adebayo said, leaning forward. "What is your desired outcome?" He thought for a moment. What did he want? He didn't want revenge, not in a petty sense. He wanted justice. He wanted the truth. He wanted his life back. "I want her to stop," he said. "I want everyone she has lied to know the truth. I want her to have no part of my business, my work, my name." Ms. Adebayo nodded slowly. "We can achieve that, and we can do it with surgical precision." She outlined a plan. It was bold, swift, and devastating. She would draft a formal cease and desist letter. It would detail Tasha's fraudulent claims, cite the trademark registration number, and demand an immediate stop to any and all misrepresentation of ownership of Jack's Precision Detailing. It would also demand a full retraction to all parties she had lied to. "When do we send it?" Darius asked. A slow, calculating smile touched Miss Adebayo's lips. "She told you the dinner was tonight, correct? At the River Club? With these potential investors?" "Yes," Darius said. "Tonight at 7. Then my paralegal will hand-deliver a copy to the club manager at 7:45 p.m. to be given to her at the table, and I, she said, tapping her pen on the legal pad, will email a digital copy to her as well as blind copying it to the host of the dinner, Mr. Mark Covington, at exactly 8 p.m., right in the middle of her main course. We will let the internet do the rest. The Covingtons are a prominent family. They will not appreciate being party to a fraud. The cost for this meticulously planned implosion was a $5,000 retainer. Darius didn't hesitate. He pulled out the business checkbook. It was the easiest check he had ever written. He was no longer just a detailer. He was a strategist, and he was about to reclaim his life. The strike was scheduled for 8 p.m. sharp. Darius spent the evening in his shop, the silence of the warehouse a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. He couldn't sit still. He paced the concrete floor, past the shelves of meticulously organized supplies, the $80 bottles of ceramic coating, the stacks of microfiber towels, the German-made orbital polishers. Each item was a testament to his work, his research, his investment. He was taking it all back. He had arranged for a trusted employee's wife to watch Maya, telling Tasha he had to work late again to prep for a big weekend event. Tasha had barely registered it, her mind entirely focused on her performance. At 7:45 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Adebayo. Package delivered to River Club manager, confirmed receipt. The first move had been made. Darius imagined the scene. The River Club, perched atop a skyscraper with its panoramic views of the city lights reflecting on the dark ribbon of the St. Johns River. The clinking of crystal glasses, the low hum of polite, wealthy conversation. Tasha would be at a prime table, holding court. She would be radiant in her $2,400 dress, animated and charming, selling a story that was not hers to tell. Mark, her new boyfriend, would be looking at her with admiration. His parents, the Covingtons, would be impressed by this brilliant, self-made woman. At 8 p.m., his phone buzzed again. Another text from Ms. Adebayo. Email sent CC Mark Covington. The trap is sprung. Darius sat down heavily on the overturned bucket. It was done. All he could do now was wait. Inside the hushed, elegant dining room of the River Club, Tasha was at the peak of her performance. The appetizers had been cleared, and she was holding a glass of $200 a bottle Cabernet, her narrative flowing effortlessly. So the key was disrupting the existing paradigm, she was saying, leaning forward conspiratorially. It wasn't about washing cars. It was about curating an experience. That's the brand equity I built. Mark's father, a formidable man with a reputation for shrewd investments, nodded slowly, clearly intrigued. And your husband? You said he handles the operations? Yes, Tasha said with a perfected, indulgent smile. He's a wonderful manager. He executes my vision on the ground. Just then, her phone, sitting face down on the white linen tablecloth, vibrated with a soft buzz. She ignored it. A moment later, Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His eyebrows furrowed. He discreetly tapped his father on the arm, showing him the screen. The elder Mr. Covington's expression hardened. Across the table, Mrs. Covington, a woman who chaired 3 different charity boards, discreetly pulled out her own phone. She typed something into the Google search bar. Tasha, oblivious for a moment longer, continued, Our 5-year plan involves franchising. Excuse me, Tasha, Mrs. Covington interrupted, her voice suddenly cool. She didn't look up from her phone. I'm looking at the official Florida State Business Registry. It says here Jack's Precision Detailing LLC is a sole proprietorship, registered to a Darius Williams. There's no mention of you. The color drained from Tasha's face. Her smile froze. A brittle mask. That's just a legal formality, she stammered, her mind racing. For tax purposes. And the federal trademark? Mr. Covington added, his voice like ice. Also registered to Darius Williams. I'm looking at it right now." He turned his phone around. On the screen was the official USPTO entry. Tasha's phone buzzed again, insistently this time. She fumbled for it, her hands suddenly clumsy. She saw the email from Bola Adebayo. The subject line screamed at her in capital letters, "Legal notice, cease and desist, trademark infringement, and fraudulent misrepresentation." Her world collapsed in on itself in that silent, horrified moment. The carefully constructed facade, the entire architecture of her lies, crumbled to dust under the fluorescent glow of 3 smartphone screens. Mark was staring at her, his expression shifting from adoration to confusion, and then to a dawning, disgusted realization. The Covingtons were looking at her as if she were a bug. The waiter arrived with their main courses, the scent of seared scallops and truffle risotto filling a space that had suddenly become a vacuum. The dinner was over. Her new life was over. She had been exposed surgically and completely in front of the very people she had worked so desperately to deceive. The first call came at 8:19 p.m. Darius let it go to voicemail. He was sitting in the dark, listening to the rain begin to patter on the metal roof of the warehouse. A new message alert popped up. He pressed play. Tasha's voice was a frantic whisper, the clatter of silverware and the distant murmur of the restaurant audible in the background. "Darius, call me right now. My phone is blowing up with some crazy email from a lawyer. It's some kind of mistake. You need to fix this. Call me." Her tone was one of annoyance, of command. She still thought she was in charge. The second call came at 8:34 p.m., as she was likely in the valet line, her humiliating exit complete. This time her voice was higher, laced with panic. "Darius, pick up the phone. Mark he just left me here. His parents wouldn't even look at me. What did you do? What the hell did you do? This is my career you're messing with, my reputation." The blame was already shifting. It was his fault, not hers. He waited. At 9:02 p.m., the third voicemail arrived. She was in her car now, the sound of the engine and the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers underscoring her rising hysteria. Okay, I get it. You're mad about something. You overheard something? Is that it? Fine. I was just playing a part, Darius. It's what you have to do in these circles. I was doing it for us, for our family. You're taking this all wrong. You have to call them back, call that lawyer, and tell her it was a misunderstanding." This was the justification phase, a desperate attempt to rewrite the reality he had uncovered. The fourth voicemail, at 9:45 p.m., was when the pleading began. She was home, the acoustics of the empty condo making her sound small and lost. Her voice was thick with tears. "Darius, please, baby, please come home. We can talk about this. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. I love you. Don't do this to us. Don't do this to me. I'll lose everything." The us was a last-ditch effort, a final appeal to a bond she herself had severed. The consequences cascaded swiftly from there. The next morning, he received a clipped formal email from Mark Covington, apologizing for having been unwittingly involved and assuring him they had severed all ties with Tasha. The social execution was complete. Vanessa sent him a string of furious texts, calling him a monster, a snake, a man determined to ruin her sister's life. He read them, felt nothing, and blocked her number. Ms. Adebayo handled the divorce proceedings. It was, as she had predicted, straightforward. The business was his premarital asset, and all its growth was a direct result of his labor. The LLC structure protected it completely. Tasha, whose consulting business turned out to be mostly fictional, with only 2 minor clients in the past year totaling less than $10,000 in income, had no claim. The court ordered the division of their shared assets. She kept her BMW with its $650 monthly lease payment she could no longer afford. He kept his Camry. The expensive furniture in the condo was sold, the proceeds split. She was forced to move out of the $2,800 a month condo and into a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town. A place that cost $1,100 a month and smelled of stale cigarettes. She had to sell her Cartier watch and her designer handbags just to make the security deposit. The life she had curated, the life funded by the man she'd called the help, had evaporated. She was left with nothing but the truth of her own choices. 6 months later, the Florida sun was warm on Darius's back. It was a perfect Sunday afternoon. The sterile, glass-walled condo in San Marco was a distant memory. He now lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a small yard in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. The mortgage, at $1,600 a month, was something he could comfortably afford, leaving him plenty of money to reinvest in the business and build a real future for him and Maya. The business was thriving more than ever. The story of what happened had circulated quietly through Jacksonville's elite circles. He'd gained 3 new high-profile clients who admired his integrity and his quiet strength. He had hired 2 more employees and bought a 4th van. And on the side of every single van, in bold, clean letters, was the new company name, Darius's Jack's Precision Detailing. He had reclaimed his name, his work, his identity. He was in the driveway washing one of the new vans. The scent of cherry-scented soap filled the air. Maya, now almost 7, was there beside him, her beautiful hair braided with colorful beads that clicked together when she moved. She was helping, which meant she was mostly spraying him with the hose from the $30 nozzle he'd bought at Home Depot. Her laughter echoed in the quiet street. "Daddy, you missed a spot!" she squealed, pointing a small, sudsy finger at the fender. "Oh, did I? I guess my manager will have to dock my pay," he said, laughing with her. It felt good to laugh, a deep, genuine sound that came from a place of peace. Maya ran inside and came back a moment later, holding a piece of paper. It was a drawing she had made. She held it up for him to see. It was a picture of the 2 of them, standing next to one of the vans. They were holding hands. She had used a dark brown crayon for their skin, carefully staying within the lines. "That's you, Daddy," she said, pointing to the taller figure. "You're a black man, and you own the business, and that's me. I'm helping." Tears pricked his eyes. He knelt down, pulling her into a hug, not caring that he was getting her wet. "That's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen," he whispered into her hair. She pulled back and looked at the van, her expression serious. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice small but clear. "Is your name still on the van?" He looked from her earnest face to the bold letters spelling out his name. A profound sense of peace settled over him, a quiet, unshakable certainty. He had been through the fire, stripped of his illusions, and had emerged on the other side, stronger and more whole than before. He had learned that true wealth isn't measured by the height of your building or the price of your watch. It's measured in integrity, in peace of mind, and in the love of a child who sees you for exactly who you are. "Yes, baby girl," he said, his voice full of a pride he had truly earned. "It is, and it always will be." We often think that success is about building something big and impressive for the world to see. But sometimes the most important thing we can ever build is a life so honest and true that your own name is the only brand you'll ever need. What do you think is the most important part of building a legacy? Let me know in the comments below.